Before we get started, obviously we should just take a minute and talk about the gut wrenching shooting that happened in D.C. outside of an event at the Jewish Museum. I haven't been there, but I know a lot of people who have and say it's a remarkable location. It's just the complaint just came out. You know, this guy's charged with murder. He will be charged with terrorism. He will be charged with hate crimes. The complaint is the way that he did the shooting. I just said on air. I'm not going to repeat it on air. It's horrible. But yeah, it's gut wrenching. I mean, thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. It's just like sitting here seeing this, and look, I mean, no matter what, when you see a crime, you know that there's somebody that's kind of crossed the line into mental health. But it's like we live in this era where we don't disagree anymore. We've kind of actually grown to hate each other,
Yeah.
and I think a lot of that leads to violence, and it's just kind of it's sad and. Hopefully from this, people kind of, let's 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 be much more cognizant of the anti-Semitism thing. You can disagree with the policies of Israel, and hopefully we learn something from it. But man, I don't know. It's just sad to see.
Yeah, and you're right. It's contagious. I mean, if you look at this
Mhm.
complaint, this guy thought that the guy who lit himself on fire outside the embassy a few months ago was a quote martyr, and so
Yeah.
this stuff breeds more of it. So,
Yeah, and
um,
to
yeah,
that, the sad thing is like, and it's social media. So social media is not real life, but after the guy lit himself on fire, which first off, if you're a military member, you're lighting yourself on fire, you've got some pretty deep issues. And I would see so many comments of people saying, well, that was very heroic of him. And the
oh,
problem is like suicide, and particularly suicide for the purpose of making a statement, is contagious, right?
yeah.
And so it's I think people need to be careful what they write, what they say, and go from there.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I agree. So, Adam, we're friends. We go back. I'm
Hmm.
going to call you Adam if you don't mind, just because, as I thought,
That's fine. Yeah,
Representative
yeah, you
Kinzinger
call
is
me
like
Adam.
14 syllables,
Yeah,
and
totally good.
but it's been great to get to know you over the last couple years. You know, I admire you. We're gonna, I'm not gonna overdo that crap here on Substack, but I did think of you today. I specifically thought of you on my ride in to the city here because I was listening to Jon Stewart's podcast, his weekly podcast, and he was interviewing Jon Favreau and John Lovett. It was three Johns. And one of them, I think Favreau said something like, this could be a moment with all that's going on around the Democratic Party and the Biden revelations. This could be a sort of an existential moment that clears out the old deadwood from the
Mhm.
Democratic Party and opens the lanes to a new generation, to centrists, to practical moderates. And I thought to myself, could that be someone like, I'm not going to ask you, Adam Kinzinger, but somebody like you? Is there an opportunity?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, it's, the Democrats are now kind of where the Republicans were in, let's call it 2012. I mean, kind of throughout the odds, right?
Yeah,
Like where there's a battle between the extremes and kind of the mainstream. And in our case, in the Republican case, we lost that battle. And part of it is we didn't aggressively take on. We thought that we could embrace the far right and make them part of us, and that they actually overtook us. And I think the Democrats are fighting their own battle with that. It's like, what is that? Now, they're not as extreme as the far right. They're not, anti-democratic. But the question is going to be, what does a 2028 run look like? Is it, let's assume that Kamala didn't win because she didn't appeal enough to the far left? Or is it we need to actually win the center? And I think it's win the center. I mean,
yeah,
you've got to win back the people that used to vote for you, the kind of the working class, right? The unions. And so, yeah, I think if somebody comes along, like you're going to have ticked off people in the Democratic Party that want their kind of liberal person, but I do think you can win with that kind of thing, and it's encouraging to hear people talk about it because the thing I worry about, Ellie, is that there is going to be like maybe the Democrats win in 26 and they'll win without a message, and
right.
they'll take that win and say, you see, we can win and we're going to win. And it's like,
Yeah.
no, you've got to have a message for 28.
Yeah, I think it could be just one of these cathartic moments for the party where, look, it's time to shed the old leadership. I mean, these it's not just Joe Biden. A lot of the leadership is over 80, over 75, and they just don't resonate anymore. Whatever
Mhm.
Chuck Schumer, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders have done in their careers, they're not resonating anymore. And I think you're right. There's a move to the center. The commenters here, I can only see if I mean they want you to run, Adam. I'm not saying it,
Yeah,
but
I mean, look, it's here's how I look at it. Like, it's not saying that Bernie and AOC don't have a role, right? Just
right.
like on the Republican Party, I don't like Jim Jordan, but you can argue that Jim Jordan brings some energy, right?
Mhm.
So yes, there is a role for somebody like Bernie Sanders and AOC. This has got to be a big tent party. That's the key. Is how do you make it a big tent party?
Yeah.
And so, will there be disagreements within the Democratic Party? Yeah, that's called democracy, and that's like, look, my wife and I don't agree on everything, right? That's
Of course.
actually it's a good thing. It's healthy. And I think, man, I think if the Democrats can, because look, they're in an existential crisis too right now. And
Yeah.
I think that the GOP is toast, but I think Democrats have got to be very concerned about like what happens if in 2028 they lose again. I'm not sure the country could sustain another kind of authoritarian presidency after this one.
So I want to follow up on that. Let's talk about Republicans. Of course, you were a Republican, like you were a centrist, moderate Republican for your career in Congress. Uh, are are these days over? I mean, is there any Republican? Was it just you and Liz Cheney, and that's it? Like in terms of people who are willing to stand on principle, stand up against Trump. Like to me, I don't even see the inklings of another person willing to follow that path.
Yeah, no, I mean I guess the next kind of pressure point will be if the economy takes a real dump, right? Then what happens? Because ultimately, it's when people start fearing politically, fearing their constituents more than they fear Trump. That's the whole ball game. Right now, they fear Trump more. They have more fealty to Trump because they have to get through a primary. So I think
Right.
maybe you could produce some. None exist right now, though. None
Yeah.
exist because look, it's interesting for me to think back, like because Trump still feels relatively new to me.
Right.
And I think to a lot of people, he's been in our life 10 years. And
Yeah.
over 10 years, he's weeded out anybody that has any sense of like kind of independence, or he's beat them down, or those people haven't run again. So, no, the GOP, there is no more independence left. When you're seeing somebody like Don Bacon, who I like, and you're saying he's the independence in the party, like that's a pretty low bar because this guy just voted for this big beautiful bill.
Right.
He'll say some things and tweet some things, but he opposed me during the January 6th stuff. So yeah, I think the GOP is basically a cult right now.
And you have the behind the scenes conversations. You know these people. I mean, they were your
Hmm.
colleagues, and I've heard you say before things like, "Look, everyone's just protecting their own ass. Like this isn't
Hmm.
nobody's acting on principle here."
Yeah, I mean, look, they're trying to survive. Now, there's a few left I can think of that, like, if you put them on CIA truth serum, they're absolutely going to believe that, like, yeah, Trump is bad. I wish he was never in our life.
Right.
But every election cycle, you start adding people that are true believers. I mean, I promise you, in 2 years, we'll probably have somebody that was there on January 6th, a pardon
Right.
January 6th there. And so you start adding these people that are now true believers, and it becomes hard to see the way out. And so the way out is less, how do we convince people in the GOP? It's less, how do we get good people in the GOP? And now it's just down to raw political power. Like, am I
Yeah.
happy with everything the Democrats do? Of course not. But they are the alternative. There's not going to be an independent party. It's the Democrats. And we've got to beat the Republicans to beat this cancer out of the country.
Do you actually really not see a genuine path forward for an independent party or a third party or a centrist party? Do you think that's just not happening?
Look, I think it could happen. Here's the thing, it could happen. There's two big kind of holdoffs of it right now. Number
Okay.
one is it needs to start in the House. Okay,
Oh,
it can't start with a presidential run
right.
because
Okay.
keep in
Yeah.
mind, let's take like the Ross Perot race, right? Let's say he'd have won. Okay, he got the
Right.
most votes. Nobody then would have gotten 270 electoral votes in the House. So then the
Right.
House votes for the president. So an independent candidate for president really can't win. So if you can start that in the House and you elect like five independents and they can deny either side the majority,
Well, that's
I think
interesting.
that's the way you can do it. But the thing that really concerns me on this is we've been so, I call it the matrix. We've been kind of plugged into the matrix to believe that, you have to line up with all these issues on a party. You have to believe everything they believe. Every issue only has two sides, and it never used to be like that. I mean, there were
Yeah.
the GOP used to have like Northern Republicans, Southern Republicans, Northern Democrats, Southern Democrats. So it's okay to have a party where people don't agree on stuff. So if we can get to that point, yeah, I think it is possible. I don't think it's possible in the very near term, though.
Yeah, I mean look, that's what you were. I mean, before we all knew you. You became especially prominent after January 6th, and when you opposed Trump. But I mean, you were a centrist, moderate Republican. I mean, that was a thing, right, on both sides.
Yeah,
I
and we
Yeah,
were in a real battle against the far right too.
right,
And I mean, that was probably defined the most of my time before January 6th in Congress was actually battling the far right. And unfortunately, we thought we could embrace them. And it's literally like saying, "Hey, I have cancer in my liver. Let me just surround it with healthy body tissue." And
right,
it ends
right.
up
Doesn't
taking
work.
over the whole body.
Right, right. I do want to talk quickly about January 6th. So it's all basically said and done now, right? Whatever, you were on
Yep.
the committee, the prosecutions have, happened and the pardons. Looking with a little bit of lens now back, historically, do you feel like consequences for January 6th have been anything approaching adequate, or do you just feel that we have failed to adequately impose any sort of credibility for January 6th?
Yeah, I mean, it's a disappointment. The thing that I hold onto that still is encouraging is I know history will actually record this correctly.
Yeah.
I have some anger, which is it was not until we did our first hearing that the DOJ even started
I
their
know we've
investigation.
talked about this. Yep, go
We
ahead.
have.
Continue.
We have. And if
Yep.
if Merrick Garland would have started when we did, Trump would be in jail. I'm convinced of that. Um, and so then to see, thousands of people pardoned, Donald Trump basically said in that, I'm creating my own army, like my own version of the brown shirts that are going to enforce what I need them to enforce. And I'm letting them know that I have your back no matter what. And so that's really concerning. But I know that on the history perspective, again, it's history's not going to say that it was the FBI or it was Antifa. It's going to say
Right.
the truth. The question is, we've got to be able to get to that point in history, right? So
Yeah.
I'm still proud of it, but very disappointed.
You on the committee, on the January 6th select committee, really forced Garland's hand. You left him with
We
no
did.
choice. That summer, I mean, you were in Congress. I was on the other side of this covering it. Like, you could feel the atmosphere change. Like, it was about to sort of slide into his, and you guys brought it back. You brought up, everyone remembers Cassidy Hutchinson and Judge Ludig and all. I mean, you gave him, in a good way, you gave him no choice. But it was, look, my chapter of my next book, which sort of traces all these special counsel cases from Watergate up through Jack Smith.
Mm.
The first line of the Jack Smith chapter is Jack Smith never had a chance, just
Right.
because it was too late. It was too late by the time Merrick Garland handed the baton to him. You are a pardon recipient now. Congratulations. I mean,
I didn't want
but
it.
yeah, no, I was going to ask. I mean, you don't want it, right?
No, no. I mean, look, my view on this is, and I mean, do I have a sheet in front of me that says I'm pardoned? No.
I was actually going to
And
ask you that. Do they like? I genuinely like. Do they mail you a certificate? Yeah.
no,
What? Yeah.
I guess it's like if they come after me, in theory, I can invoke it.
Right.
But my view is this: is like I wish, like I get why they did it, but I wish the president wouldn't have because
Yeah.
my view on taking on Trump is you actually have to stand up to him, and
Yeah.
I think we've seen through, I'll call it history, but really his time as president, we've seen that when you stand up to him, most of the time he backs down, right? Now we see today that Harvard, standing up, God bless them,
Yeah.
but now they're suspending the, having foreign students. It's insane. It's
Yeah.
authoritarian, of
I don't even know
course.
how does that even. What's the legal hook? I'm mystified by that.
I mean,
Yeah.
I think Harvard's going to have to do, what case number 12 in court, right? This
Yeah.
is, and this is the whole Trump playbook is we have to litigate everything in court. And so they move forward with these things and intimidate, not to mention, of course, the law firms and everything else. So,
Yep.
but my view is fight them. Especially, look, this is what frustrates me is when you have the law firms that basically came groveling and said, we'll do $100 million of pro bono. I had somebody from one of those law firms who was pretty pissed about it, but he said, look, we do
Oh,
100 million in pro bono anyway, so it's not really much. I'm like, that's not the point.
I was
The
gonna say, let
point
me tell
is,
you why that's bullshit. Yeah. Go
yeah,
ahead.
the
Yeah.
point is you're saying to the president, we can be intimidated. And then
Right.
what happens if somebody like you or me need to get represented by this organization, this law firm? They're going to be like, no, I'm sorry, we can't do it. And
Yep.
that's what the danger is.
And let me tell you what is important about this law firm story. I mean, there's a lot important about it, but I was so in the early days of this, you had some firms standing up, including Covington, where I used to work. Some firms suing him in court. All the firms that sue him in court are going to win. Perkins
Yeah.
Coie's already started to win, but you had the first two firms that settled. I'll put settled in quotation marks here, which was Paul Weiss and then was it Skadden for 40 million and 100 million. But two things I want to point out. One, you can go, yeah, pro bono for veterans. Who doesn't love pro bono? Who doesn't love veterans? The problem is these firms have to get their pro bono approved by the government, or it doesn't count. You want to? When I was at my firm, when I was at Covington, I did pro bono for a death penalty, a guy who'd been sentenced to death. We were, challenging his conviction. We did a pro bono case for black farmers who had been denied loans from the Department of Agriculture. That stuff would not be accepted. And like, how does this work? Do the firms have some guy in the White House and they got to email and go, hey, Mr. White House overseer, we want to do pro bono for so and so. Can that count against our 40 million or not? So that's part of the problem. The other thing that's gone largely unnoticed, I have the list somewhere. A lot of firms have sort of slid in under the radar and settled after those first big two. Those
Mhm.
first two got a lot of attention. There's 8 or 10 other big ones who have come in and quietly, no one's quite looking. I actually expected more of the law firm community. I talked to leaders in the law firm community. I'll say Abby Lowell, who's a friend of mine, who's a very influential lawyer, is like, we're going to stand up. We're going to fight together. Abby has been true to his word. But a lot of firms are bailing out. People, I did a Pennsylvania bar conference last week, and I said, play devil's advocate here. And somebody made a fair point. He said, look, law firms are profit-driven machines. This is they're for-profit private enterprise, and so they have to think about their bottom line. My response is, I completely respect and understand that, but we're not making widgets here.
Right.
We are a profession. We have ethical underpinnings to what we do. And so, yeah, I think that's what he's doing to you, what Trump is doing to you and your colleagues and the law firms and the universities is all of a piece. It's all retributive.
Yeah, and it's meant to intimidate. I mean, that's the point. Is like here's the thing: is like I don't know if this is actually true. I heard it, so it's a good example, even if it's false. Is they say that lions are tough, but actually a lion's roar is what paralyzes its prey, and so it roars. The prey's like, "Holy
You're working on
crap!"
me.
And yeah.
Yeah,
So if that's not true, whatever, sounds
right.
good.
It's a good
And so,
parable. Yeah,
yeah, but that's the situation with Trump is it's his roar. If we sit back and say, yes, this guy has the power to X, Y, and Z, then he will. Then he does. If
yeah.
we sit back and say, no, you know what? Okay, Donald Trump, you want to come after me for investigating you? Do it. I'll kick your ass in court. I guarantee it, right? Like, yeah, it's going to
You
be
said that on
inconvenient.
air. I've sat to your left as you said that on air, which I really
Yeah,
respect. Yeah.
yeah. It's like, look, I'll happily fight you. Like, will it suck? Yeah, I don't want to go through that, but I'll beat you, and I'll be 3 times more effective in taking you on. And
Yeah.
that's what we need. If imagine if the whole country did that, like this guy would be just sitting alone in the White House like he was on January 7th.
Yeah. Do you is there anything that Trump has made a priority, any policies he's implemented that you actually support or like or approve of, from your foundations as a conservative Republican? Is there anything he's done where you've said, good, that we needed to do?
No, I mean,
Okay.
look, everything he's done that I think had a point, he's overdone. And
Right.
he's done it for the wrong reasons. So, like border security, yes, we needed that. He's weaponized that.
Yeah.
Um, and he's demonized immigrants, which I'm firmly against. I believe in comprehensive immigration reform. The DEI stuff got out of control, but he's gone over the top on it. Like, telling private companies we're going to withhold funding, telling colleges we're going to withhold funding. Like, what happened to the free market? What happened to the freedom of choice? Like, it's anything he does that would have a foundation in conservatism, he does it the wrong way. And honestly, the GOP today, just look at the bill they just passed. There's nothing
Right.
conservative about them. They're not a conservative movement anymore.
Right. I mean, I said, look, with the Harvard issue, what could possibly be less conservative, lowercase c, than we, the government, are going to require you, a private university, to audit your entire student body and faculty for their ideology and then fix it. Like that's, I mean, it's Orwellian. It's cliche to say that
It's
that's Orwellian, but
Orwellian,
yeah,
it's Marxist. I mean, really?
right.
And I mean, even look at the president's foreign policy, okay? I don't care where you fall on this issue. One day he's like, we're gonna clear out Gaza and make it a hotel. The
Right.
next day, he's like, net Israel can screw off. One day, he's like, we're going to bomb Iran. The next day, he's negotiating JCPOA 2. One day, he says, we need a ceasefire in Russia or we're going to add sanctions. Putin says, well, let's meet in Turkey on Thursday. And Trump says, that's a great idea. We're meeting in, there's no sanctions.
Right.
There is no core principle. His core principle is himself. It's why he's taking a $400 million jet from Qatar that goes with him, so we still have to buy an Air Force One for the next president,
Right.
and it's nothing but corruption. And I think the Democrats, and I'll be honest with you, I'm very frustrated because the Democrats don't have their message together. They are not talking about this as corruption as it is. It feels like they're kind of playing the game a little bit with them, and I think that's why the base is so pissed off at them.
Yeah, there's real discontentment within the Democratic Party right now, and I don't know what I really don't know what the future is. What do you make of the we'll call it the Democratic bench? And we only have, I guess, a couple minutes left. I want to keep this thing on schedule, but who do you look at in the Democratic Party and see promise in for the future?
Look, I think somebody like an Andy Bashir, okay,
Yeah, I
that's
saw him the other day. Yeah, he's real impressive.
somebody like that. I think, though, and here's my prediction: nobody we're talking about right now is going to be the candidate
Where
because
are you on the celebrity thing, like Stephen A. and all that? Do you think that's
no,
just BS? Yeah.
no. I actually think it's possible that the Democrats could find their version of a celebrity. It's not going to be Stephen A. That guy's just like so annoying on ESPN. And
I
but
love Stephen A. He's my pal.
yeah, but
Elie
so
Honig from CNN. That's my Stephen
but
A.
But I think it's going to end up being somebody we're not talking about. If it is a celebrity, it'll be a serious one, like a Mark Cuban, even though it's not him. And
Right.
then, but I also think America by the end of this is actually going to be ready for a technocrat to come in for the presidency.
Hmm.
And I'll say this too is the next president needs to spend the first year or two kind of clawing back the damage that was done, and then the rest of his or her term putting guardrails in place to make sure this never happens again. And this is going to
Yeah.
be like that. That will make that person like the George Washington of the modern era because we have to put these guardrails in place. Because unfortunately, Trump has run the playbook that future authoritarians know how to run now, and can exploit the weaknesses.
That exactly that what you just said is how I end my book. I keep pumping my book, which isn't even available yet, but it's coming out in September. But it's about the history of these internal investigations from like Watergate and Iran Contra and Clinton and Ken Starr all the way up through Jack Smith. And I sort of end by saying, look, let's be real. There's not going to be any special counsel in the next 4 years unless he appoints one to go after Jack Smith. But there's not going to be any traditional internal looking special counsel. But that doesn't mean we just forget about it and give up
Right.
entirely on the possibility of accountability.
That's
So
right.
that's sort of how I
Well,
close out the book.
and I'll add on that. This is another thing the Democrats should be doing is very loudly telling, for instance, Qatar, we know you're bribing us, and you may
Right.
get your way for 3.5 years, but we're
Yeah.
going to win in 28, and we're going to make you pay for that. What do you
Yeah.
say to El Salvador? Look, if you keep housing these people against due process, we're gonna get our pound of flesh out of you when we take over, and that at least gives these other countries a thought of like, okay, yeah, it'd be nice to have to be able to bribe Trump for 3.5 years, but that goes by pretty quick. So
Right.
that's another thing they have to think about.
That's interesting. Well, we got to end, but Adam, I think the people who are watching will rebel if I don't at least press you a little bit. Like, what is your I do this when we're one on one, but like,
Yeah.
what is there anything you can tell these people who love you? But I don't just mean love, but like they think that it's important that we have a leader like you. Like, is there any hint you can give this crowd about what might be in your political future or your future in general?
Yeah, look, I mean, I have no intention of running for anything in 26.
Okay.
And I would never run for the House of Representatives again. I did my time
Okay.
there.
Okay.
I'm not ruling out, looking at is there a lane for somebody like me for the big run
I
because
like it.
mainly from the perspective of somebody's got to represent that, right? And somebody's got to talk about the Democrats as a big party. And somebody's got to reach out to those union voters again. And I was actually supported by the unions as a Republican. And so I wouldn't rule anything out. I'm not sitting around scheming because honestly, I've learned that, let's see what's the best laid plans of mice and men. It's true. But I'm not ruling anything out. We'll see.
Good.
The fire is still there. That's for
Good,
sure.
good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad to hear that. I think the viewers are fired up. It's going crazy right now. um, Adam, thanks. It was great chatting with you. I appreciate you doing this. Thanks for helping us figure out Substack. It's not that complicated.
No,
Uh,
it's great.
I'll see you in a couple weeks when you're out here.
You bet. Take care, my
All
man.
right. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. All right. I don't know what to do.
You just
Oh,
got to hit the
end.
in session
End.
thing.
There we go.